Classmates, this is Tom Barling, and I'd like to talk to you about the book Built to Last. And it's a pretty interesting book. I think it was written in '94 in the first edition, and it's kind of interesting because it talks about visionary companies and how they go about crafting their visions, their succession plans, and their leadership, and how they treated their people. And certain companies like Motorola has really come on hard times since '94. They got into the digital cell phone business late, so it definitely hurt them because they ended up selling a bunch of their subsidiaries, laying off a bunch of people, and they're still around, obviously, but nowhere near as big as they used to. I think at some point in Arizona, they used to employ 12,000 people, and it's nowhere near that at this point. The book also talks about Walmart and how Sam Walton started it in a small town in Arkansas. And basically, I think he bought it from somebody, a little general store, but how it just grew, and grew. And I mean, we all hear the horror stories about how Walmart workers are treated and underpaid, and it's interesting because when you read their vision and what they supposedly believe in, and how they run their business, it just doesn't kind of jive with how it seems like they're treating their people. But that was definitely one of the more interesting points I found. Just looking at some of these companies that have changed from '94 to where they're at now. Another company I found interesting was Merck, a pharmaceutical drug company, and they started in the 1800s. But we don't think altruism with drug companies, basically not trying to make money. But one of their credos was to help people, over making money. And in the early 1900s, they ended up making a drug and giving it to a South American country because they had this problem. It was called river blindness. I guess people that were going into these rivers were getting some kind of parasitic worm that would eventually cause blindness if not treated. So they were actually giving them these drugs and not expecting payment, which again I find that very surprising, especially in this day and age where everybody seems like they're trying to make money. And Johnson and Johnson, their corporate credo was kind of the same way. Is they were here for the doctors, the nurses, and the patients. They were here for everybody's well-being instead of just trying to make a buck, which is again, you don't think of things that way, but yeah, interesting. Another interesting thing I found with these visionary companies is their succession plans. Most of the time, you think, maybe a year or two before somebody's going to retire, but some of these companies, they were constantly grooming people, even from the lower and middle ranks, so that they had within house succession plans. And we're talking 8, 9 years, before these people were going to retire, they were thinking about who was going to replace them. And I find that amazing because, my company, I think we've gone through I don't know, I've been there 12 years, and I swear we've had like 6 or 7 presidents, and none of them have been within house, as far as I know. So it just seems like they keep throwing one body after another, and none of these people seem to have, I would say, the vision of what this company is meant for and what they're supposed to be doing. So it's definitely very cool that that they were constantly thinking about that problem. What else was I going to talk about? Another interesting thing was with Sony and the Hewlett Packard founders. We're taught in these business classes, have a plan, do these steps, and make sure everything is tight. You're going through basically certain orders, and you're going to have your ABCs done, before you try and get money. Well, Sony, the founder of Sony, making money wasn't he didn't have a business plan when he started it. Basically, he started the company, sat down, hired some people. They sat down and knocked out a corporate vision. And one of the things I found interesting was this was around World War II, or a little after, was to make Japan a respectable manufacturer of goods, because made in Japan meant crap, in the early in the 40s, 50s, and I think even into the late 60s. So he wanted to bring back a national pride and culture to their manufacturing. And I found it interesting that money was not chief on his list, and it was the same with HP. They didn't have a business plan. They started their company, hired some people, And they sat down and knocked out a corporate vision. They didn't, and it wasn't just to make money. It was to make goods that they were proud of, not just cheap, crappy knockoffs. Um, which again, in this day and age, is very, very rare. What else was I going to talk about? One of the things, one of the things I found interesting is again visionary companies, and I think this was Hewlett Packard in the 1940s. Actually, you know what? Let me double check that. And I think it was HP. They actually had bonus plans and compensation for everyone in the company, not just the president, but everybody, even down to the janitor level, which is insane. I mean, who does that these days? Nobody. Um, we just received bonuses at my company, and I think it was normally it's I don't know, not even maybe 1% of something. And I can guarantee you the janitors aren't sharing in that. So the fact that they're thinking that far ahead in the 1940s to try and make their employees happy and include them is pretty interesting. So I mean, to kind of sum it all up, it's not. The book was really not what I was expecting because again, in these classes we're taking, they tell you to do this, this, and this, have this plan, you know, have this product, try and borrow this money. But these guys just said, we want to start a company. We don't have an idea what we're going to do yet, but we're going to sit down, knock out a vision, and make it happen. And they did, which was, awesome. It's good to know that there's not actually one way to start a business. That yeah, you can kind of fly, by the tail of your seat of your pants and make something happen. So it's kind of cool. Book was interesting, and I would recommend it because again, it just kind of talks about what these companies did for their employees was way ahead of their time. Um, in the 40s and 50s, how they treated their employees and how they included them in corporate training classes and advancement. So, that's my thoughts on the book. Hope you liked it.